Okay, we got on easy this morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Alan?
Baruch Hashem.
Good.
Hopefully later next week, I'll see you in person.
Oh, depends on how later. I'm leaving next week, the end of the week.
You're going back? You're not going back to Israel.
Yes and no. I have a wedding up in Boston.
Oh, Mazel Tov.
Thank you. So we're flying up there first. We'll spend Shabbos and we'll spend the weekend in Boston. And then from there, we're flying back to Eretz Yisrael.
And till when?
I'll be back after the holidays.
Really? Oh my.
Yeah.
When are you leaving for Boston? What date?
Friday, whatever it is, that Friday, a week from Friday, 17th, 18th, something like that.
Okay, so I might see you before you leave.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna start with the learning sponsors, and then we'll get settled into the Gemara. I'm going to review a little bit because I had a chance to go back over that top section, okay? And I wanted to just clarify one or two points there. Okay. All right, learning sponsors. Friends of Leoni Meiserman, Leah Saber Bas Chanoch Zundel, Friends of Melaskotsky, Moshe Zelig Ben Mordechai, Martin Lipman and family in memory of his wife, Malka Chana Bas Pinchas, Friends of Herb Jeremias, Tzvi Ben Zev, Friends of Sam Coleman, Shmuel Ben Yaakov, Friends of Gideon Lozinski, Mordechai Shlomo Ben Meir, Bella and David Adler in memory of her father, Eliyahu Ben Yosef Cohen, those who were inspired by our Rebbetzin Emerita, Sheila Shapiro, Sarah Esther Malka Bat Meshlum Yisachar. Have a month of learning by Malki and Rabbi Dr. Yankee Honig in memory of her father, Yosef Ben Yecheskel Yehuda, Marsha Federbush in memory of her husband, Oriel Pinchas Ben Rav Shimon, Gary and Marsha Schrager in memory of his parents, Freda Bat Hendel and David Ben Yosef. A week of learning again by Marsha Federbush, this time in memory of her mother, Chaya Elka Bat Moshe Akiva, Shelley and Oscar Moll, in memory of her father, Shlomo Ruben Ben Binyamin. Okay, we have, today is the 7th, right? So we have a day of learning by Rochelle and Robert Gruen, in memory of her father, Tzvi Aryeh Ben Avraham Halevi. Shamas Heaven Aliyah, Crank Rafia, Velt Yeshua Shematzliah, B'nai Israel, a good Gaben Shkia.
Amen. Amen.
Right. Okay. Okay, so we went over to the top of Pei Gimel Amud Aleph, but as I said, I want to go back to try to clarify something. Okay, I'm going to go back to the point. Okay, we remember we saw this whole discussion back and forth of a brother saying that I'm betrothing you and you can marry anyone with the exception of X. That was our Mishnah. Then the Gemara tried to give an example, okay, where a brother comes and says, okay, and basically the one brother says, I'm betrothed you with the exception, okay, but you're betrothed to me, you're excluding everybody else except my brother. Okay, so that was the point that we were hanging on, right? And the Gemara told us basically there, okay. Okay, this was about Imam, right? Amar Abaye, If we're going to say that this is the correct view of Rabbi Abba, Ba Ruvain v'Kidsha, Ruvain comes, we said, he betroths the girl, Chutz mi Shimon, with the exception of his brother. So the implication is trying to be clear that you can have a situation where you can exclude somebody. So that would just support Rabbi Eliezer's view, okay, in our Mishnah, that it's possible to exclude somebody in a situation. Okay? That's what he's saying, all right? Okay, then Shimon comes, Subah Shimon, the Kidsha Chutz mi Ruvain, and he does the same thing. Both of them die, okay, and she has Yibum with the third brother, okay? All right, and then the Gemara says, hold on a second. Remember we said that according to the Torah, you should only have Yibum with one husband and not with two. That's what the Gemara said. My Tama, what would be the reason? Kiddishe de Reuven ahanu, that the betrothal with Reuven was valid. The Kiddushe de Shimon lo ha'enu, that the Kiddushin with Shimon was not valid. Okay, because if he said already to the exclusion of him, then his Kiddushin is not tofes. Okay, that was part of the issue that we needed to clarify. The Ella, but rather, okay, so the Gemara now comes back to raise the question, is it ever possible to have a situation where a woman is married to two husbands at the same time? Okay, so the shiur I listened to yesterday says actually in Yabamos that brings up this question and says it really is possible. Why? Because a woman could be the husband, her husband could have multiple brothers, okay? And the husband dies, okay? And so one brother has the intent to do Yibum, but one of the other brothers goes ahead and does a ma'amar with her, okay? And ma'amar was the rabbinic method by which to clarify an intention to do marriage. In that situation, she is basically betrothed to both men, okay? It's a derabanan, I admit, but that was the example that this shiur that I listened to suggests to show that it is possible. Yes?
It's not marriage.
It's betrothal, right? Right? It's betrothal.
It's not really it's
not kedushin. It's right. So one is connected to her as Zika because of Yibum, and one is connected to her because of the mama. Okay, so I agree, but I'm saying, but in the shiur he presented that would give an example of the possibility of being betrothed in a sense to two different men. Okay, all right. So what happens? So then the Gemara went on, right? Right? Kigon Shabbat Ruvain v'Kidsha Chutz mi Shimon. Okay, that the older brother, we said Ruvain, betrothed her with the exception of Shimon. So now she is forbidden to all others as well as his brother, right? Uba lemisra ha'alma. And what happens? Okay, and he says here, right, that in this situation, okay, that, okay, and so he comes to
answer her on everybody
answer her and everybody else, right? The Mishra Alma on the rest of the world. The Kiddushe de Shimon Ahanu Lemishra Ruvain. And then the Kiddushin with Shimon makes Ruvain Asher. Why? Because okay, he's Eishes Ach. Exactly. So what happens? Bayu Abai. So now Abai raises the following question. Amarla, he says to her, Arei at muteret l'chol adam chutz mi Ruvain v'Shimon. Okay, So if that's the case, somebody could come and say you are permitted to everyone with the exception of Reuven and Shimon. V'chazar, now he comes back, v'amar the Reuven v'Shimon. And then he comes back and says to her, no, you know what? You're permitted to marry Reuven and Shimon. Okay? Now, does that mean that he's canceled what he has said before? And that's why the Gemara asks, Mahu, what's the situation? Mi amrinan maida sar shara. Do we say that what he forbade previously he now permits? O Dilma, or perhaps maida asar shara. If we say what he forbade he now permits, umaida shara, and does that mean that what he permits, asar, that he can then forbade? Im timselomar. If you're going to say, now let's go back to the top of Pei Gimel. Maida sar shara. If you're going to say that what he forbids, he can now permit, Reuven mahu, then what's the status, okay, to regards to Reuven? Is it only that he's permitting Reuven? The Reuven, v'hu hadin l'shimon. But if you say they're permitted, then the same thing should apply to Shimon. V'hai dikamar leReuven. And the fact that he said it in regards to Reuven, mishum de patach bei. Maybe it was only because he mentioned him first. Oh, Dilma, or perhaps leReuven dafka, or perhaps his intent was only for her to be permitted to Reuven, but not to Shimon. Ve'im timsel omar leReuven dafka. And if you want to say that it's only particularly for Reuven that she was permitted, even though originally he had said you can't marry both Reuven and Shimon, right? The Shimon mahu, then what's the status for Shimon, right? The Shimon, right? V'hu hadin leReuven. So the same thing could then apply to Reuven. Maybe he was only permitting her to marry Dafka Shimon and not marry Reuven, like he originally stated earlier. V'haidika amar Shimon, and the fact that he simply chose now to change his mind in regards to Shimon, mishum de salik minei, okay, and maybe that was because there, right? Okay, he said because he said his state, he made his statement later. Okay. Oh, Dilma, perhaps l'Shimon dafka, or perhaps particularly he implied, yes, I changed my mind regards to Shimon. You could marry him, but not back to Reuben. So here we come back now to where we finished up. By Rav Ashi, Rav Ashi raised the following question: Afla Shimon mahu. So then, what's the status with Shimon? Aruven kai. Does it mean that he only changed his mind in regards to Reuven? O Dilma af alma kai. Or do we say maybe that he even changed his mind to permit her to marry whomever? Okay, Teku. And therefore we stopped there and said that's where we have no clear definition of what the situation was. Because in essence, what he did, okay, when he made that initial statement, is he forbade her to everybody, to Reuven and to Shimon. So the question is, if you're saying he changed his mind in regards to one of those two brothers, is it possible that he changed his mind to anybody else? Okay, that's why it's all confusing and taken. Okay, that's where we stopped yesterday. Okay, now we get to an amazing piece of Gemara. Okay, what we're going to see, just a quick word of intro and then we'll jump in. We saw that Rabbi Eliezer held a certain opinion, right, from our Mishnah. We're going to see that now people are going to challenge his views. In fact, 3 sages at least will challenge his views. Somebody comes back and says, how can you challenge his views? He's dead already. He has no way to answer you. And maybe were he alive, he could answer. In fact, somebody else comes along and says, I'll pick up Rabbi Eliezer's presentation and I'll answer him for you in each one of the three cases. Okay, so that's how we're going to see that the Gemara structurally is going to proceed. Okay, and each time that somebody challenges us, says, how can you challenge him? He can't answer you because he's dead already. Okay, so let's see what happens. Tanu Rabbanan, we're about.
I was thinking, Rabbi Eliezer said this, and there wasn't a vote for the majority that said we agree.
Right, right.
Because somebody else now said so.
Uh-huh.
Senate kind of say, I want to be like.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we start with a Breita, and the Breita tells us as follows about, I said 8 lines down, everybody have the place. Tanu Rabbanan, says a Breita. La'achar petirato she Rabbi Eliezer, after the death of Rabbi Eliezer, what happened? Right? Nichnesu arba zakenim, 4 other sages, 4 other elders, lahashiv al dvarav, wanted to challenge his opinion. Eluhain, who were they? Number 1, Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Okay. Number 2, Rabbi Tarfon. Number 3, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. And number 4, Rabbi Akiva. Okay, so we got 4 heavyweights here, so to speak, challenging, right? So what happens? They're going to give us each of their attempts to challenge Rabbi Eliezer first. Okay, Rabbi Tarfon, and then Rabbi Tarfon, Va'amar. So Rabbi Tarfon comes back and he answers and says as follows: Va'amar harei shehalcha zo v'niseit la'achiv shel zeh shenesra alav. Let's say that the woman went and she went ahead and married, particularly the man for whom the husband, when he gave her the get, forbade her. Okay, umate, and he dies. Okay, so this is the second husband, right? Below banim, without any children. What happens? Lo nimtza zeh oker davar min haTorah. Does this not mean that we are uprooting something from the Torah, namely the whole possibility of Yibum? Exactly. Ha lamadata she'ein zekritut, and therefore we have to say that with that kind of a situation that Rabbi Eliezer permitted, okay, there was no clear separation, no clear kritut, because still,
The get is not valid,
okay,
that
so the
represents-
get is not valid. So she was still really married. So that happened, the marriage to the second guy is going to be problematic. Okay. But according to Rabbi Tarfon, the big issue is you're ruining, you're destroying, in essence, the concept, the practice of Yibum. Okay. Second challenge. Ner Rabbi Yossi Aglili v'amar. Heichan matzinu asur lezeh umutar lezeh. Where do we find that situations occur where one is forbidden to this one but permitted to another? Ha'asur asur lakol. Right. This is what we discussed yesterday. When she's betrothed, okay, she is forbidden to everybody. Okay. Isn't that the case? And so what happens? Here too, okay? If she's supposed to be doing Yibum, okay, she's forbidden to anybody except the Yabam. Ha'asur asur lakol. V'hamutar mutar lakol. The one who is permitted is permitted to all.
So when she's divorced, she's permitted to everybody.
To everybody.
That's a contradiction to Rabbi Lesser, who says,
Says
even if he leaves
that
over
that
somebody.
right, that what we called that we called restrictive divorce,
Right.
okay, was not viable. Right, that was the point. It challenges again Rabbi Eliezer. Right, Ha lamadata she'ein zekritut. And therefore we learn again there's no clear separation. Okay, third challenge. Ne'aneh Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah va'amar kritut. Okay, according to the Torah, we need complete separation. Davar hakoret beino lebeina, something that clearly makes a distinction, a separation between him and her. Ha limadata she'ein zekritut. Here, therefore, we see, if that's the case, that there is no clear separation because
He left over.
he said he made an exposition that said you can't marry this guy. That still implies, right?
That he has, I was over.
Right? Now, our point was, remember, we were trying to discover whether there that Mishnah using the word Ella meant chutz or almanat. Okay, so the implication we're clearly getting here, okay, is that almost any kind of condition, not just what Rabbi Eliezer said, but almost any kind of a condition in a get is not clear kritut. And so we could begin to think Rabbanan must hold you cannot say any kind of condition in the get. Okay? Let's see what happens if that supposition works. Okay. Next one, the fourth one is Rabbi Akiva, and he's going to give two challenges. Nene Rabbi Akiva, va'amar harei shahal chazo. Here the woman went. V'nis'et le'echad min hashon. She goes and marries somebody in general, with the assumption that, according to Rabbi Eliezer, it was a valid get, right? Vayula banim, and she has children with Mr. Shuk, right? V'nit armala unit garsha, and then she becomes widowed or divorced from Mr. Shuk. What did she do? Okay, she moves over onto husband number 3, right? Va'amda v'niseit lazeh shene'asra alav. Then she goes back and marries the same man that husband number 1 had prohibited. After all, that was supposedly a valid get, according to at least Rabbi Eliezer, number 1. Number 2, she had a marriage in between. So because of that, that so totally removes everything that went before that. So now it all depends simply on her status, either as a widow or as a divorcee of husband number 2. And if husband number 2 divorced her, he did not preclude anybody, right? So she could go back and marry the one that husband number 1 had forbade, okay? So what happens? Rabbi Akiva argues, Lo nimtza get batel. Don't we there find, as a result, that original get from husband number 1 is now invalid. So therefore she was still married to him. And as a result, any progeny she had with husband number 2, ubaneha mamzerim, are going to be considered mamzerim. Okay, so that was the first challenge by Rabbi Akiva. Halamadata she'ein zekritut. And therefore that teaches us that there was no clear separation there. Davar acher. And now Rabbi Akiva comes back with his second position, second, so to speak, challenge. Harei shahaya zeh shene'asra alav kohen. Let's say that the person that was forbidden to her by husband number 1 was a kohen. Umeit hamigaresh, and the husband number 1 dies. Okay, after he has given her the get. Okay, now what happens? What's her status? Is she going to be considered a widow and therefore
Permissible to the Kohen.
permissible to the Kohen? Or is she considered a grusha and not permissible to the Kohen? Okay? Lo nimtzeit almana etzlo. Okay? she would not be found considered a widow according to him, okay, to that individual, okay, the one who she was prohibited, who was a Kohen. She would be considered a grusha to him. Ugrusha etzel kol adam, but she would be considered, right?
The rest of the world.
In
she's
other
a
words,
grusha.
the rest of the world, she's a grusha. To
him,
him, he could, to that Kohen, he could consider her an almana, right? Because he died, right? V'kal v'chomer. And here we have a kal v'chomer, namely, ma grusha shehi kala asura, whereas a grusha, okay, for a Kohen, okay, it is a lesser
only is allowed.
right? It's a lesser prohibition, right? It's allowed. B'shvil tzad girushin sheba, because of the fact that she's a divorcee. Eshet ish, whereas if that get is not a valid get, shehi chamura, lo kol shekain, how much more so is that a problem? Halamadet, therefore we learn, she'ein zekritut. Again, we have a challenge that there is no separation there. Okay, so what happens? Amar lehen Rabbi Yoshua. So Rabbi Yoshua, okay, is now going to respond to the four of them. Okay, what does he tell them? Ein meshivin et ha'ari lachar mita. You can't, ha'ari refers to Rabbi Eliezer. You cannot challenge him because he's deceased. Amar Rava, says Rava, kuhu idlaho pircha. They all have a problem then, a challenge with Rabbi Eliezer. Labar mida Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, with the exception of that of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, the Litlei Pircha, who doesn't have a problem or a challenge with him. Why? We'll see. Tanya Nami Hachi, and we have a Braita that teaches as follows. Amar Rabbi Yossi, says Rabbi Yossi, Ro'eh ani et divrei Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah midivrei kulan. And I see, he says, the words of Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah more than the others. Okay, now we're going to see what happens at this point. That would seem to say that Rabbi Yossi would seem to agree with the view of Rabbi Eliezer that it's permissible to have this restrictive kind of divorce. But what happens? We're now going to look back at each of the four challenges and see, is it possible to
See
answer them?
what the problem with each one of the challenges.
Right? Okay. Amamar, says the master, as we said before. Nene Rabbi Tarfon, remember he was the first. Va'amar hareisha halchazo v'niseit lachiv shel zeh shenesrala. He went and married the brother who had been prohibited, Umeit below banim, and he dies without any children. Lo nimtza zeh oker davar min haTorah. Doesn't that say that it's uprooting the whole practice of Yibum? That was Rabbi Tarfon's challenge, right? Oker, we saying he is uprooting it? Ihu akar. No, it's the deceased husband. It's the first husband who is actually uprooting the Yibum. Why? Ela matna la'akor davar min haTorah. But what he did is he made a condition that would result in the uprooting of the Yibum practice. Okay? Matna, you're saying he made a condition? Okay? Mika Amarla, according to whom is that? Lo sagi la de lo min saba le la achma. It's not enough, says the Gemara, that she wouldn't be able to marry the brother, the hahu gavra. Okay, but why? It's any person. Okay, that would be an exception, right? Ela gorem la'akor davar min haTorah, but it causes something to be uprooted from the Torah, namely Yibum. Gorem, it causes it. Ela me'ata, but rather from here, bat achiv lo yisa. Okay, if that's the case, okay, if we're going to be so concerned in that situation, what about a practice that was very common in the time of Chazal and was considered an important, or really a more than important, really what's the word I want to use? A preferred, okay, a preferred style of marriage. It was when an uncle married a niece. Okay, but what's the issue? Okay, the issue is if that uncle were to die without any progeny, who would be the Yabam? The father of the girl he married. Okay, and in that case, it's erva. There's no yibum whatsoever to be done. Okay, so therefore, that's what the Gemara is going to is challenging. Ela me'ata, if that's the case, bat achiv lo yisa, that a man should not marry his niece. Shema yamut, lest he die below banim without any children. V'nimtza goreim la'akor davar min haTorah. And the result would be that you are totally eliminating any possibility of yibum. That's why I said by the time of Chazal, it became a preferred status kind of marriage. Okay, to marry your niece. Okay, so what happens? Hainu pircha. Therefore, that's why we have a problem, says the Gemara.
This is a very good, valid question.
Okay, uvamai, and in regards to what? Okay, coming back then to our original Mishnah and how we tried to understand it. Ilema bachutz. If we said that Rabbi Elazar, right, held that the word Ela meant with the exception of so and so, Mishra Shara Rabbi Eliezer. We already said that Rabbi Elazar permits that kind of restrictive divorce, right? The Tanya, as was taught elsewhere in a Braita, right? And we said, remember, that was the Braita that came at the bottom of the Amud. Moda Rabbi Elazar, b'magaresh et ishto, that Rabbi Elazar acknowledges that when a person divorces his wife, va'amar la harei at muteret l'chol adam, and says you are permitted to all people, chutz miploni, with the exception of so and so, v'halcha v'niseit le'echad min hashuk, and she goes and marries one from the marketplace, v'nit armala unit garsha, and she became widowed or divorced, shemuteret lezesh nesra, that then she is permitted to marry the one that the first husband excluded. That Rabbi Eliezer certainly says that's all right, right? Ella, if on the other hand, we say that Rabbi Eliezer understood, okay, the word Ella in that Mishnah as Ba'al Almanat, on a condition, okay, what happens? Then we've got the problem. Right? Now the second challenge. Nana Rabbi Yossi Haglili. What did he say? Va'amar. Notice the Gemara reviews in each case what their challenge was, and then comes back to answer. Va'amar hechan matzinu asur lazeh umutar lazeh. Where do we find an example where the same person could be permitted to this one and forbidden to this one? I'll give you an answer. Ha'asur asur lakol. What about a situation where a woman marries, she's prohibited to all other men? V'hamutar mutar lakol. Or what about permitted to all others? Below. No, we have a situation with that, right? Namely, how about v'harei truma v'kodshim? You have an example where truma is permitted to Kohen, but it's forbidden to others. Or kodshim, that the same thing there. She'asura lezeh umuteret lezeh. that the truma and kodshim are forbidden to an Israel, but are permitted to a Kohen. So you have a situation, or better still, be'isur isha ka'amrina, where we talk about the prohibition regarding a married woman. That's what we can say.
That's Moore's answer. We're only, where do you have a case with respect to a married woman? She's permitted to this
Permitted
one
to
and
one,
also to
and
that.
not, okay, and forbidden the others. She's married, so she's prohibited to all other men, but permitted to this one. All right, v'harei arayot bi'ishut. What about kamrinan? Or we could take the example of arayas, and there too, and say the same thing. Okay, that in that situation she is prohibited to certain ones, but permitted to others. Okay, hare eshet ish. Why? Because in that case we could argue she's a married woman. Hainu pircha, and that's an example of a problem. Ubamai, and how do we deal with it? Ilema ba'al manat. If again we were going to say that the word ela was conditional, harehu tra etzlo biznut. Maybe she is permitted to the fellow that she was originally prohibited by the first husband, but only in regards to having affairs with him.
Because he said you can't
Can't
marry her,
marry him,
so you can
exactly,
have an affair with her.
right? So she could have, right? Ela bachutz, but if we understand it with the exception, okay, then clearly can't have any relation. Let's get to the next example. Nene Rabbi Akiva, he says, Va'amar hareisha halcha zo v'niseit le'echad min hashuk. She goes and marries one from the marketplace. Vayula banim, and she has progeny with him. V'nit armala o nit garsha, and she became widowed or divorced. Va'amda v'niseit lezeh shene'asra ala. And then she goes back and she marries the one who the first husband had prohibited. Lo nimtza get batel ubanehem mamzerim. Aren't we going to find then that get from the first husband becomes null and void, and the children from the second husband are all considered mamzerim? Ihachi, if that's the case, bakula tana'ai da'amanami. If that's the case, then as I put forward to you before, then any kind of condition on the get is going to be problematic, right? Lo tinaseh. And as a result, the woman is never going to be able to marry. Okay? Dilma lo mekaima leila tina'an. Okay, perhaps she doesn't fulfill the condition. V'nimtza get batel. And as a result, the divorce from the first husband is going to be that null and void. Ubaneham mamzerim, and therefore the children for any marriage to anyone is going to be mamzerim. Hainu pircha, and that's our problem. Ubamai al ilemai. Okay, and what are we going to say there? Bachutz. Okay, that if it's done with the exception, mashra shara, that's where Rabbi Elazar permitted. Rabbi Elazar, the Tanya, as was taught in the Braita, Modeh haya Rabbi Elazar, b'magaresh et ishto, that Rabbi Elazar would agree with regards to one divorcing one's wife. Va'amar la harei at muteret lechol adam chutz miploni, where she says you are permitted to any person with the exception of X. Okay, v'halcha v'niseit le'echad min hashuk. She goes and marries somebody else. V'nit armala v'nit garsha. She becomes widowed or divorced. Shemuteret lezeh shene'asra alav. And then she is permitted to marry the one who the first husband had forbade, right? Ella ba'al manat. But if you understood Rabbi Eliezer's statement of Ella initially as a conditional, right? Okay, then we had the problem. Davar acher, what about the second challenge by Rabbi Akiva? Harei shahaya zeh ne'esra alav kohen, where we said that the forbidden person mentioned by the first husband's in the first husband's get was a Kohen, umet hamigaresh, and the first husband dies. Lo nimtzeit almana etzlo, ugrusha etzel kol adam. Aren't we going to say that she's not considered, okay, a widow by that man, okay, but she is considered a widow by everybody else. The kal v'chomer, and we said we had this kal v'chomer problem, okay? Ma rusha, right? Shaya kala asura, where we said that with regards to a divorcee, it was a minor prohibition. Mishum tzad girushin shabbat, because of the nature of the act of divorce, right? Eshet ish chamura lo kol shekain. How much more so if that get is not invalid, okay, and therefore she would be involved with a married woman. Ubamai, and what are we going to do? How are we going to deal with this? Ilema ba'almanat. If we say then that it was almanat on a condition, hare grusha etzlo biznut, then she is only permitted to him, okay, as would a divorcee with znut. Ela bachutz, but therefore we must say that he understood it as an exception. Rabbi Akiva, and in regards to Rabbi Akiva, what do we have to say? Ichutz sevirale. If Rabbi Akiva understood the term Ella in our Mishnah as with the exception, if that was his opinion, lo tivchutz, let him say it clearly as in that regard. V'i almanat sevirale. And if Rabbi Akiva was of the opinion that it was a conditional statement, okay, lo tiv almanat, let him clearly state it, okay, that's how it should be mentioned, clarified, okay. What happens? Rabbi Akiva, Shamiala de Ika de Amar Chutz, the Ika de Amar Almanat. That Rabbi Akiva therefore must have learned it, that there are some who understand it as exception and others who understand it as conditional. Okay? Namely, let's go on now. Man da Amar Chutz, okay, how is it that Rabbi Akiva could appreciate it both sides? According to those who understood the word Ella as chutz, an exception, Hai Pircha, that indeed is our problem. Uman da Amar Almanat, and according to those who hold that it was conditional, Hai Pircha, here too we have a problem. Umay Pircha, and what's the problem? Inema Isur Kahuna Shani. If we're going to say that maybe in his second challenge, Rabbi Akiva's, where he said that the man who was forbidden by the first husband was a Kohen, maybe we're going to say that's a unique situation because we're stricter as to who a Kohen can marry because of his special status. Ha, Rabbi Elazar, Nami mi Isur Kuhuna Kamaitele. But here too, wouldn't we have to say that Rabbi Elazar also understands the prohibitions related to kahuna, and that's why how can he bring it there? Rabba, kede Rabbi Yanai, mishum zakein echad kamatne. So the Gemara finishes here by says that Rabba, okay, giving this whole series of explanations, must be similar in view to Rabbi Yanai, okay, who gave it in the name of a certain elder and teaches it that was Rabbi Akiva's view, that in some ways he was this, understood this, some way that. Okay, all right, we're up to a new piece now.
One of the other rabbis saying, this is what I think he meant.
Right.
What I think he
Right.
meant.
Okay, let's go on. We came back to the argument that you can't answer Rabbi Elazar because he's deceased. That's where we're starting off now. Amar lahen Rabbi Yoshua ein meshivin et ha'ari lachar mita. Right? Lamemra, this comes to tell us the Rabbi Yoshua kavate severely. Does this seem to tell us that Rabbi Yoshua really was of the same opinion as Rabbi Elazar, that this restrictive divorce with a Tanai is doable? Okay. Vaha ihunami mifrich kaparich. But he also raised a question and raised a challenge. Hachika amar lahu. This is what he said to him. Ledidi, in my view, nami it le pircha. There is also a problem here. Mihu, nevertheless, bein ledidi, bein ledidchom, whether regards to me or regards to you, ein meshivin ta'ari lachar mita. We can't challenge him after his death. Umay pircha de Rabbi Yoshua. So we have the question, and what was the problem, the challenge of Rabbi Yoshua? The Tanya has taught as follows in a Braita. Amar Rabbi Yoshua, Makish kodme havia shnia lekodme havia rishona. Okay, then what is he saying? Okay, that basically this, can we compare? I'm going to phrase it more as a question. Can we make a comparison between the second marriage and the first marriage? Ma kodme havaya rishona. Whereas in regards to the first marriage, delo agida ba'inish achrina. Okay, where we do not have an ability for her to, let's say, marry, relate to other people. Af kodme havaya shniya, delo agida ba'inish achrina. So likewise, in the second marriage, she is not able to, have a relation, a connection with other men. Okay, right? So that would be a comparison, right?
So that would be not like Rabbi Elazar.
So in other words, that would be
Not like Rabbi Elazar.
challenging Rabbi Eliezer, because Rabbi Eliezer
Said you could make it.
you could have connection with other men, with the only exception being this one.
Right.
Okay, right. All right. So the law
Of the first husband or divorce would be the same thing, wouldn't make a difference.
we'll see. Gufa. Let's come back to this. Moder Rebat, our text told us, Moder Rabbi Elazar, but Megaresh Ishto, that when Rabbi Elazar acknowledged that when a person divorced his wife, Va'amar lahareyat muteret lechol adam, you're permitted to all men, chutz miploni, with the exception of X, Va'alcha v'nisei le'echad min hashot, and she went and married somebody out, v'netar mala o nitgarsha, became widowed or divorced, shemuteret lezeh shnei asra alav, that then she is permitted to marry the one the first husband forbade. Okay. Heshiv Rabbi Shimon bar Elazar, Shuva the divrei Rabbi Elazar, and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar comes back and gives an answer to the words of Rabbi Elazar. Hechan matzinu shezeh oser v'zeh matir. Where again do we find situations where this one is permitted, this one is forbidden, and this one is permitted? V'lo? No, we don't have any. V'arei yivama. What about the example? Let's give a different example of the woman who's the sister-in-law. The Baal Oser via Bam Matir. Okay, that any other husband is forbidden, and the Yabam is permitted. Hatam Yabam hu ka'asarle. There, normally, once she's married, okay, the brother-in-law is prohibited to her. Okay, de'imi Baal. Hasharya v'kaima, okay, because only from the husband, okay, when he were to die, okay, or divorce, but when he to die, only then would the brother-in-law be permitted and be able to have a relations with her. Okay, or take another example. Hare nidarim. Take the example of vows. Denoder asur, okay, where the person makes a vow, osir, they forbid something for themselves. V'chacham matir, and a sage then is able to permit it. But we got a problem with this answer. Ha'amar Rabbi Yochanan. But what about what Rabbi Yochanan says? Namely, ein chacham matir klum ela b'charata. No, that the only way the sage can exempt the person from their vow is because there has to be charata. There has to be some level of regret. Exactly. Hare hafarat habal. Okay, I'll give you another example. What about when a husband is able to nullify the wife's vow? Right? Namely, the isha noderet, that a wife may make a vow, ubal mefar, and the husband nullifies it. Gemara answers, hold on, that also there's a problem. Hatam kidarav Pinchas mishmei derav. There we might point to the view of Rav Pinchas in the name of Rabbah. The Amar Rav Pinchas mishmei derav, who says in the name of Rabbah, kol hanoderet al dat ba'alahi noderet. That whenever she makes a vow, she does so based on the willingness or the acknowledgement of the husband. Okay? So what happens? We now get to the fourth, another example. Nene Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So we have an answer by Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah who says, Kritut, what about the requirement of separation? Davar hakoret beino lebeina, that we say that it must, the get must mean a formal separation between him and her. Halemadet she'ein ze kritut. Here we've learned then that there wasn't a clear separation. V'Rabbanan, and as far as the rabbis go, hai kritut, this requirement of separation, mai avdele, what do they do with it? They require, as it was taught in the following Braita, this is your get on the condition that you don't drink wine. On the condition that you never ever visit your father. Ein zekritut. Those are not valid conditions, and therefore there's no separation there. Shloshim yom. But if the rabbi would acknowledge that if the husband said, you can't visit your husband for 30 days, okay, harei zekritut, that would then be a valid separation. Okay? Ve'idach, and the others, right? Namely Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, mikaret kritut nafka. They learn the phrase, the requirement of separation from the word mikaret. Ve'idach, and the others, karet kritut lo darshe. And the rabbis don't darshan the words karet kritut to learn the requirement of separation. Amar Rabba harei zegite. Says Rabba, what about the fact that he says, here's your gift. Amanat shelo tishti yayin kol yemei chayai. So long as you don't drink wine all the days of my life. Ein zekritut. That's not valid separation. Kol yemei chayai ploni. If you say all the days of the life of Mesha Pipik, harei zekritut. That would be valid separation. Ma'ishana, what's the difference? Asks the Gemara. Chaye ploni, in regards to the life of so and so, the dilma me'it umekaima le, that maybe he's going to die, and therefore the condition is fulfilled, right? Chai didei nami, but couldn't we say that if he based his condition on his own life, the same should apply? Right? Eventually he'll die, right? Dilma ma'it mekaima le b'tna'eh. Perhaps he too is going to die and therefore fulfill the requirement. Ela ema, but rather I would say, kol yamei ha'ichi, right? Kol yamei ha'ichi, ein zekritut. We would say all the days, it's like saying all the days of my life, there is no separation. Kol yamei chayai, or chayai ploni, if you say all the days of my life, or the days of so-and-so, hare zekritut, then that would be separation, depending on his lashon, his language. Okay, we're going to finish up a little bit and then we'll stop. By mine Rava mi Rav Nachman, he asks the following question of Rav Nachman. Hayom I at ishti. Today you are no longer my wife. Ulamachar at ishti. Tomorrow you're my wife. Right? Mahu, what's the status? To buy the Rabbi Eliezer, he asked Rabbi Eliezer to buy the Rabbanan. You could ask it according to the view of Rabbi Eliezer. You could ask it according to the view of the rabbis. To buy the Rabbi Eliezer, you can ask it according to the view of Rabbi Eliezer, where we said that there was right restrictive divorce, namely, Ad kam lo ka'amar Rabbi Eliezer hatam, ela dilema'an de kashare le'olam. Up to there, we said that when Rabbi Eliezer holds that he's permitted forever. Aval hacha. But in this particular case, where he defined it as, you're not my wife today, you are my wife tomorrow. Here, lo, maybe not. Odilma lo shana, or perhaps there's no difference. To buy the Rabbanan, you could raise this question about this scenario with regards to the rabbis. Ad kam lo ka'amrei Rabbanan. Up to here, the rabbis didn't say hatam there in that case. Ela de lo paska mine legamre, that she's separated from him completely. Aval hacha. But in our case, if today you're not my wife, tomorrow you are my wife. Kevan de paska, since she's separated, paska, she's separated. Okay? Batar de bai hadar pashta. After it was questioned, he come back and answered, mistabra. Okay, it seems logical, reasonable to assume, ben le Rabbi Eliezer, ben le Rabbanan, kevan de paska paska. Once she's separated from him, she is separated. And we'll stop right there. Okay. Okay. All right.
Yasher Koach, Rabbi.
Okay.
Rabbi Green.
Okay.
And we'll definitely give an idea of what's happening with the seal
All
tomorrow.
right. Okay.
Right? Marty, have a good day.
Rabbi Green, I don't know if you remember,
Yeah.
that was the question I asked you yesterday,
Marty,
but
see you
I
tomorrow.
don't know, maybe you didn't pay attention. I said, what happens if the father, if the brother died and he left two other brothers? So there's a zika between both of them, and they both give her they could both do it at the same time. One could give her engage her, and one could do a mimer.
Yeah. That was what the issue that we said that in theory that could be a situation. Okay. Ruvain, you're getting around? Yeah. Okay. Bob, great.
has finalized it?
No, we haven't even considered that yet.
Oh,
That's that's gonna be the big issue that we're gonna have to talk about over the weekend.
Okay.
Because there are certain benefits that come with being a citizen.
right,
I'll give you two examples.
okay.
Okay, one, a clear financial benefit, that 8% of the mortgage money gets paid back to you for the apartment.
Really?
Better than that, you get a different kind of transportation card.
Oh,
So anybody over age 75 travels free on the bus.
oh,
And we have to take buses everywhere we go.
right. I hear you.
So it's a big decision, Bob.
Huh?
You know, it's a big decision. I mean,
Hashem should grant you the power to make the correct decision.
you know, it's hard partly because two of our three sons and half our
So where
grandchildren.
would it be, Beit Shemesh?
No, no.
Where?
In Yerushalayim, our here, one of our sons lives right here in Boca. Okay,
So it's gonna be.
so you know, it's
Split anyway.
it would be a split anyway. I mean, we would do that anyway. Even if we were, so we'll have to see.
You're so used to this lifestyle.
Yeah,
And
and
he's like, I don't know.
exactly.
Hashem should grant you again. the
Thank
power to
you.
make
Thank you.
that correct decision.
If I get a nevuah at night, I'll let you know. Good morning, good morning. Good morning. How you doing, Bob? How's your wife? Everybody good? Good. Thank you. Shira. Hi. Two quick items. I put an envelope in there. So Karen is, wanted to fill out the form to be sure that they have room. Secondly, I thought, she said she thought she would pay the donation. So we're gonna. Okay, I should take it out of here. Good morning, how are you? Yeah, it's 36. Sure. And then, as I said, I was trying to see if I had it back.
Got it.
Oh, okay. The other item, I think it's signing up for tickets near the end. Yeah. No, we're not gonna do that, but I wanna try to find somebody that has, and I see her signature. So I figure if somebody's signing up for tickets near us, that means they're gonna do. Yeah. Okay, I didn't know if you know. Gotta be a little education, I wouldn't expect that. It's still early. All right. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna see how Jack is feeling. If he, what? Yes, he did. He was in Shalom Shabbos. Okay, so I think that's a good sign, but I don't know if he wants to. I'll speak with him over the next week or so and try to clarify what his feeling is about. I understand Marvin Weinstein had surgery. That's what I heard the other day. Yeah. So, and I'll talk to you a little more later about some of the other stuff.
I didn't recognize you, Jim.
What?
Now you're like one of us. How long
How
are you staying for?
I'm leaving tomorrow,
Oh, everybody's going on Tuesday. That's a good thing, really, right?
Okay.
Well,
See
see you later.
you next time.
Okay, Rob and I guys are actually sitting.
Yep,
If it's gonna be in the same slot.
we own the apartment, but we still work full time up north. And we still have one child left in high school, so we can't come down here.
I had to, I had originally given that to, what? Estimate.
When did you buy the car?
So we had actually
I
inherited.
don't know if
and
he,
it's like
no, I, this is last year. some reason that song did not work for him. What did he have?
B29 and B99.
Really?
Yeah,
And the corner went shut down, 499 might go.
yeah.
Renovated corner report.
When I bought my box 8 years ago, renovated, we got $155. And when my second wife died a year ago, every week they go, one thing,
Who else? What? Right, but I don't think Jack is gonna be up. Right.
Are you looking to connect as well?
Okay, well, I'll speak to Rabbi Yosef, so let's put him in tentatively after March. Because that should be a good slot. That should be a good. What? Exactly, exactly. All right, we'll put that tentative. Marty starts the first, what do you want?
They still have all the restaurants there.
Okay, we'll see. All right, we'll talk about it some more. All right, thank you. The same week. I don't have a date. I have a commitment from Harold Road to do November, but he didn't give me dates when I talked about it, because it was a month ago when we were both in Israel together.
My son has 8 bedrooms and 7 bedrooms.
It would be nice. I don't know when he's going to be coming back. And then I have dates from David Jacobowitz also. But I still didn't hear from Ken Schaus. I'm going to have to send him another. Let me just look real quick while we're talking. Okay. See if my phone is working. Yes. Hold on a second.
Oh, really?
Okay, David Jacobowitz is looking at January 8, 15, and 22 for rabbis on rotation. Right.
All right, so then if we do Chelsea, what does Chelsea normally do? 3 or 4?
It depends on how long he's staying. Some years he's done 3, other years he's been able to do 4. That's why I'll send him another email today. Yeah. All right. Okay, very good. Thank you. I don't know. Is that a Monday? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. They will come on that. Yeah. Right. And I'm going to do rabbis in rotation again. I just have to determine whether I need 4 or 5. Okay,
Anyway, I think I have a full work. Let me let you go.
All right. I don't know if I'm going to do it in 4 or 5. So if I need 5, then I could go. Yeah. Okay, but we may have to juggle. Yeah, I'll send Ken Chelsea another email. And, let's see if I can get in touch with Harold if he has any day ones going on. He didn't have the topic there. No.
11:13 to 12:04.
Yeah.
And Chelsea could do 12:11 through 1:1. If he wants 3, he can skip 1:1. And then Jacobo could do the 8th to the 22nd, which is what he already planned, and we can pick the 29th, so whatever you want. And if he wants 5 days, it's 7 and 6, depending on his time.
All right, we'll find- okay,
And if he only wants 3 days, he can start on the 20th.
yeah, all right. Okay, we'll talk some more.
Okay,
All right,
that's good.
thank you.